Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to Business Innovators Radio. This is your host, Constant Taylor. Today, we have a very special guest on the show, and they're going to share some very exciting information with us. So, if you're looking to increase your personal and professional effectiveness, then you've come to the right place. Our special guest today is Scott Gottschalk. Scott has been speaking professionally for over 15 years, and the content that he primarily speaks on is agricultural. He does agricultural consulting. He's an advocate, and he also does motivational and inspirational speaking. He's based out of Minneapolis. And Scott, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much.
We're glad to have you. I'd like to kick off the show by asking you if you could tell the listeners a little bit about your business and how you help companies become more effective.
Well, you know, it's one thing that I value is human and people interaction. That's something that makes the world go round. It's something that is helpful when you're trying to build a relationship. And so, you know, to me, it's good to try to find maybe what somebody has an itch for, but they're unsure of how to scratch it. And I like to be the person to try to help them figure out how to do that scratching. So it's always about trying to find out what people are interested in, what makes them tick, what's their hot buttons, and that's where I like to specialize.
Okay, great. So just kind of zooming in, what are if you take a look at your prototypical company, organization, or business professional, and you zoom in and you say, okay, this is someone that I can really help, I can really add value to this person or their organization, what would that be?
Well, are you asking the question, what would I target them, or who am I targeting?
Who are you targeting? And
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I was going to say oftentimes it's difficult to get to decision makers. A lot of times the folks that are lining up speakers or people don't have a lot of understanding about the subject matter or even what their superiors or their organization is looking for. They're the in-between person. And that can be very challenging in this industry because the person that does make the decisions isn't often the one that ends up finally lining this up. So it becomes a question-answer process of going through very complex and detailed responses, trying to get to the bottom of what they're looking for, why are they looking for that, and at all times trying to get a final audience with a decision maker is the fastest and best way to actually get to a mutual win-win for everybody's behalf, actually.
Okay. So looking at the agricultural segment of the business, in what areas do you specifically discuss with them? That's a pretty broad industry. Are you looking at, food safety, that sort of thing?
Well, right. I've been fortunate enough to do agricultural consulting in several different developing nations across the world. My particular specialty is I'm in the dairy industry, and those assignments have been to help establish, dairy industries in countries such as Afghanistan and Lebanon and Africa, Eastern African countries and things like that. So that would be my area of expertise on an international basis. And from a result of those interactions and networking, that's certainly catapulted into various contacts, leads, and clients that have stepped forth wanting some services, here in America.
Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. Now, taking a step back, could you give us a little bit of your background, how you started, and how you moved into the speaking and consulting business?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I don't know. I'm sure that's a different answer and response from almost everybody that
Absolutely.
would do this interview. But I had a very unique situation as I was growing up. What I believe catapulted me into a speaking career was, in fact, at age 16 and a sophomore in high school. I was a rather rambunctious youth and not always working very hard to get the best grades. And I ended up with an English teacher that particular year who found something in me that nobody else had at least discovered or tried to develop in me. And that particular teacher started out by complimenting me, and I'd never heard this compliment. She said, "You are a gifted storyteller." And I thought, well, that's kind of nice to hear something like that from a teacher instead of a scolding for doing something wrong in class. This one actually has something nice to say. Well, that teacher also then started our class on a path of learning to write short stories. And in them first attempts to write, this teacher worked with me and helped me to develop not only my verbal storytelling abilities, but to be able to put those stories pen to paper, if you will. And she challenged me at age 16 I want to someday have you contact me again and let me know that you've published your first book. And so again, I'm not really sure the right order here of which drove which behavior and ended up shaping my life and my career, but that particular teacher planted that seed in the back of my mind. And when I was 18 and started going to college, I started writing my first book. And not having a lot of experience, it took some time. It took most of the time of my 4 years of college on and off to get through it, but I had a finished manuscript, and right upon graduation from college, I was lucky enough to have my first book, actually called The Folk and Their Fauna, which is several short stories about animal stories. It was published and did then and still does very well in the market. But that then started to catapult me into folks asking, and I never knew, was I being asked to speak at events because I was an author, or vice versa? I never quite understood, or because I was a good storyteller. And eventually I ended up writing a total of 3 different books. Those books have been a lot of fun because they go, with the storytelling mentality and the clients that ask me to speak. I sometimes have a little funny quip that I always say to the folks lining up their speakers. I say, so oftentimes you will look for a speaker because they're an author. But I said, you'll find that this is one author that actually can speak, because a lot of authors can write really good books. They're not the best speakers, and I've been unfortunately privy to those situations. And so I always jokingly say, I'm not sure if I'm a very good writer, but I pride myself in being a pretty good speaker.
Yeah.
So that's just a twist on it.
I was thinking that probably your author skills will probably get you in the door, but your storytelling skills will actually keep them coming back for you.
Well, that's exactly right. And I have found that there are a lot of times as you'll have prospects and clients that you'll interact with, they're all by the book. They're all by what's your resume, what's your experience, how many tapes have you got that we can listen to, and all this, and they take it to a very mechanical level, and they lose sight of the people side of it, the relationship side of it, and I always say, if I can have just a few moments to interact one human being to another human being, that will change the outcome in a very favorable manner almost 100% of the time.
So during your inspirational speeches and the story that you just shared, with us about when you were a child and having the English teachers see something in you that you didn't see in yourself and being able to manifest that into the person that you are today. That's pretty inspirational, and I don't know if you use that, but what types of content do you speak on during inspirational discussions?
Well, I have one that's a favorite, and I call it your bucket list, your legacy. And I really always start that particular talk out with again, it's sort of an analogy. It's amazing how popular the bucket list speeches are nowadays. Everyone's got one. Everybody's challenging everyone to reach for their stars and fulfill their bucket list. And it's amazing when you look at the accomplishments of the people giving those speeches. It's rather mundane. And I, on the other hand, I was raised in a family where there were 5 brothers and sisters, and I was the one that always was on the edge. The pushing too fast, going too far. Just had to see something. I grew up on a dairy farm, and my parents, even to this day, I'm not sure they've ever left our county. They're 80 years old, and they just have lived their life and worked on their farm, and they just never went anywhere and still don't want to go anywhere. And I challenged my mom and dad when I was 18. I said, when I go to college, I'm going to make a goal. I'm going to go to every continent of the world. And I remember my father saying, well, why on earth would you want to do that? And, if you have to explain, they won't understand.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You have to understand here. But I was very blessed to be able to spend Christmas in a tent in Antarctica 2 Christmases ago, and that was my 7th and final continent. And so now I try to take those vast and wonderful experiences of this terrific place we call Mother Earth and just build that into stories and inspirations and motivational type talks that can maybe drive the greatness in others is what I'm trying to accomplish.
Now, with the last few minutes here that we have, if there is one message that you would like to deliver to the listeners so that if they don't get anything else out of this interview, this is what you would like to leave them with, what would that be?
Well, I would say that the message is don't be satisfied with the mundane. Don't be status quo. Don't pay attention to what you see and hear all the time in media and the news channels. My greatest concern is that seem to be driven by a world of terrorism. And the only way that ever ends up winning is you succumb to the fear. My statement, the one final thought is be bold and live your life. It's a cherished time, whatever time you have on this planet, and stop looking over your shoulder about what might happen. Make it happen.
Excellent advice and well received. Now, if the listeners would like to get in contact with you or your organization, find out more about what you do and possibly engage with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I have 3 methods. There would be a website, which is it's called GottschalkBooks.com. So it's GOTTSCHALK books BOOKS.com. That's one method. Another is direct email, which my email address is GottschalkScott@yahoo.com. That's GOTTSCHALK@yahoo.com. And preferred method is I love to speak one-on-one with people, and that'd be my phone number, which is 320-894-5900.
Excellent. Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was very fascinating and informative information that you shared with our listeners, and we appreciate it.
All right. You have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.